Bonjour à toutes et bonjour à tous, je suis Thierry Fritsch.
Good afternoon. I'm Thierry Fritsch. I am responsible for conferences for the Interprofessional Council of Wines of Alsace, and I would like to welcome you to our masterclass. Today is the 27th of February 2023, and we're opening the second Digitasting fair after a first worldwide premiere 2021. We decided to launch upon the second edition, that is today, starting on the 27th of February until March the 1st. That is 3 days. We have pioneer wines, visionary wines, and we decided to launch a visionary fair, 100% for professionals, 100% digital, so you can follow us online, but with real tasting, because we send our boxes around the world where you have samples of the different wines. One question one could ask is, why do we still have this type of meeting, knowing that COVID prevented us from doing this? Well, now we've come back, first of all in Paris with a major stand. We'll be in Provence as well, and elsewhere around the world, Boston, Hong Kong, Stockholm, Singapore, amongst others, and let us not forget Alsace, because we'll have the route of the terroirs from April all the way to July this year. You have to understand that this digital appointment doesn't replace fairs and going there in person. This digital meeting or appointment completes the in-person presence, simply because you cannot be everywhere at the same time. It's not always easy to travel. Coming to Alsace and going back on the same day is not that easy. And digital meetings make it possible for you to meet many more wine producers in Alsace. You can have a presentation staying back home. It costs much less, no travel. Now, a couple of figures for this year, 2023. For our Digitasting 2023, we have 74 producers who are exposing at the fair. Each of them have 4 vintages. We have more than 2,800 accredited professionals around the world from 41 countries, 700 interviews, visio conferences on 3 days, one-to-one with the producers. We also have an interactive platform, website, where you can find a lot of information about the wine growers, what type of markets they have or are seeking, and also all the different types of wine you can find in Alsace. And I'll come back to those in a second. We have also recorded more than 1,000 orders of our boxes, and as I said, to 41 countries, over 8,300 of them, and we have mini flutes, 33,000 mini flutes, such as this one. You can imagine what organization lies behind this work and logistics. As compared to the 2021 edition, we decided to improve things, to add on things, because it's always time for renewal and renaissance. Alsace wants to be a pioneer, and we decided that the masterclass would be a So Trendy masterclass. To accompany me, I have 3 wine tasters and wine enthusiasts. Each one is a specialist in his or her own field. Each comes from a different country, and each one brings his special touch and perspective to 4 different wines. All of them are typically trendy, and all of them are Alsatian wines. We'll start with Jenny.
Sure.
Ladies first.
Hello. My name is Jennifer Wagoner. I am from the US, but I'm currently based in London as the global head of wine for a London-based restaurant group called Zuma, where we have over 20 locations worldwide.
And how many restaurants?
We're constantly growing, so we're more than 20 at this point, but we have many in development, and we have a few opening this summer as well. Several. We have many restaurants.
Okay.
Merci.
Thank you.
Yves,
Yves, you're regional, if I dare say, because you come from next door Switzerland. Hi, Yves. Hi, Thierry. Yes, Yves Beck. I'm an author and I'm a wine critic at Yves Beck Wine. And I do cover quite a few regions, countries actually, regions and countries. And of course, Alsace is one of them.
Le troisième, on veut dire,
Wonderful. And
co-animateur,
our third
Manuel. Bonjour Manuel.
wine taster, Manuel. Manuel Pirondet. I'm a sommelier. I come from Bourgogne, actually. That's where I was born, but my heart lies in Alsace. I am a best workman of France 2011. I'm most happy to be at this edition and to be at the crossroads of wine tasting in Alsace. Thank you. The theme of our masterclass is the new trends, because although we have a 1,000-year-old trade, there are new trends, new tastes, new habits, new moments where people consume wine. And Alsace is one of the very few areas, wine-growing areas, where know-how makes it possible to react immediately to this new trend we see in consumers. And I hope that this afternoon you will have the opportunity of learning more about these new trends, thanks to a selection of 4 wines which show you how Alsace finds its place at this crossroads of new trends. Therefore, we have a renewal, a renaissance, learning how to react to new trends. What do consumers expect? They expect authenticity, more focus on the women and men who are behind each bottle, behind each label, and also more respect for the environment in which wines have been made. That is where the grapes have grown, nature, basically. A very new conception of consumption. And consumption isn't as formal as it used to be, and we'll come back to that. This is the reason for which we've developed 4 themes, which we'll be looking at together. The first theme is So Fresh. So Fresh is looking for more elegant, fresher, dry wines, more accessible wines. The second theme is So Terroir. Here we're looking for something which has a place, an origin, a story, something authentic, a wine with roots. We want to know what its birthplace is, where it was born. And something new, So Sweet. We're going to talk about sweet wines which are there for your gourmet pleasure, to leave the beaten tracks. It's culinary audacity, and we have wonderful representatives to taste this So Sweet theme. And finally, last but not least, the So Red thematic, because if it's true that Alsace is known for its white wines, reds also have their place. Not too tannic, not too powerful, not too heavy, silky and fruity, but we'll come back to that later. That will be the 4th theme, which we'll be developing in a minute. But before we start, a couple of pieces of technical information. You can follow the masterclass either in French or in English, up to you to use the settings on the website, choose your language. We'll be discussing these themes for 50 minutes to 1 hour. Of course, we want an interactive session, so send in your questions. We'll only be answering them at the end, though, in order to make sure that we keep the flow of the presentation. And from tomorrow on, you'll have the possibility to take a second look at the masterclass in French or in English, because we have a replay. And for those who are interested, there will also be a version in Japanese and in German. Let's start. Let's start with the first trend, So Fresh. We said that the consumption habits were changing. There are new trends. We want more fresh products, fresh meat, but also less meat, eating healthy, more bio-food, organic, but also vegan, vegetarian. New trends in eating bowls or sushis, which are more and more seducing for consumers. And we've also noticed that meals are restructured, destructured, reorganized, and sometimes totally improvised. There's a search for simplicity and pleasure. And here wine has a very new place, very new dimension. It has to be accessible, drinkable, fresh. It's a search for freedom. And the So Fresh wine could be described as an accessible wine, an elegant, well-balanced wine between fruitiness, acidity, substance. It can be dry. And we've noticed that in drinking habits, the So Fresh wine is the wine that can stay in the fridge, and you take the bottle out either during the meal or at any point in time where you decide you want to drink. So it's the safe bet, the answer to a desire to drink. And you don't have to be an expert. It's a very accessible wine. It's a very, very safe investment. To illustrate the So Fresh theme, let us taste the first wine. You're free to open your flute, your mini flute. It's a Riesling. It's an iconic Riesling because it was elaborated by the Schoffet family, Domaine Schoffet, which is located in Colmar. It's a 2020 wine. It was quite a warm year. The wine origins from Hart, gravel soil, and for your information, the age of the stock is somewhere between 60 and 80 years old. Quite impressive, and it's gravel soil, but it's nevertheless quite light. Even though the year was warm, the fact that the grape is of a certain age regulated it and gave it the necessary minerality. Generally speaking, at first, the nose is quite discreet. You're waiting for it. And then quite quickly, you have this white flower smell, taste of white flower also. And it's quite wide-bodied. It was a warm year. And then, secondly, you have this elegance, this purity, and length, depth. It's the whole variety of Riesling. It's blooming, if I dare say, although it's simple in not a critical way, as a compliment. Jenny, I would like to ask you, in this So Fresh trend where we look for something accessible, what role do you think Alsatian wines can play? There's this new dynamic of being simple. What's their place? What's the positioning of Alsace wine?
So talking about versatility, authenticity, transparency, you're seeing this trend very much in restaurant floors. So what I've been finding from the perspective of somebody who interacts with guests on a regular basis is that they're looking for something fresh, they're looking for something exciting, they're looking for something very versatile to kind of take them through a meal or something to start with. In the concept of restaurants where we are, it's contemporary Japanese, which gives it a kind of a unique, a unique view into how people are dining, because there's also steaks and things like this. So we have everything from raw, we have then like salads, then it goes into something a little bit more rich. And so people are looking for...
Just 1 second, if I can interrupt you. Can you increase the volume?
Sure. Oh, no problem.
Okay.
Sure. Can I don't know if I do that or...
It's the other one. The other one. The other one. Yeah.
The other...
Sorry for that.
No, sorry. This one?
Yeah, this one, yes.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Hello?
Is it better? I'll just continue. Okay, we'll see. Yeah?
Yeah?
Yeah, go on.
I'm pushing up, but I'm not sure.
Voilà. Okay.
We'll try.
Okay, thank you.
So...
Sorry for that.
No worries. So we have dishes ranging from very light all the way through very rich. And so what we're noticing is that guests are looking for something to start instead of just having something rich all the way through. And so wines from Alsace are very, very pertinent in the fact that we can start them with a Cremant, a white wine, something beautiful to start, and then it can finish out throughout their meal as well. So that's a cool trend. Fresh can also mean new and exciting, and for guests, Alsace wines can be very new and exciting in their dining experience.
Well, you've told us about all the pluses of Alsace, And
Un vin
my
sec,
question is concerning
c'est quoi la
now
définition?
dry
Comment est-ce que
wines.
tu perçois
How
le-
would you
un
define
vin
a
sec?
dry wine? What are you expecting?
So when I think of a great dry white wine, first of all, Alsace has an obvious place in this category in many different respects. When I think about great dry wines, I think about a wine that not only is balanced, is nuanced, has a sense of place, has history, but also one that you can enjoy with friends. A great white wine is something that you share. It's an experience. And what I think Alsace does very well is it can create an experience through not only the history and the quality of the wines, but for the conversation that it provides around it. I think also from a sommelier perspective, it allows the sommeliers that work in the restaurants to create a story that then allows the guests to get excited about the region and to carry on from there.
On parle sec, mais on parle également de fraîcheur.
Dry wines, but also fresh wines. What could you tell us about the aspect fresh, and how do you explain to your guests what freshness is?
So freshness, when I explain it to a guest, is something bright, lifted, elegant, but mouth-watering. It makes you want to have that second sip. It makes you want to have that second bottle. It gives you something. It's exciting. It's something that you can. I keep saying, you want to have more than one bottle. Okay, so fresh to me is exciting. It's lifted, it's bright, and expressive. And I think these wines from Alsace definitely have those going on.
En fait, c'est de la buvabilité. En fait.
Drinkable, actually, if I dare summarize.
Exactly.
Messieurs, si vous avez...
Gentlemen.
J'aimerais témoigner évidemment dans le sens de Jenny sur les commentaires. Je crois d'abord que...
Well, hard to take the floor after that. I would say if there's this so fresh trend, which we've noticed in the consumption of neophytes, it's first of all that there's a link to the new cuisine, as you've mentioned previously. It's eating food for what it is, and a dynamic, fresh, airy white wine is exactly what matches that food. It's the right pairing, and Alsace has a magnificent variety of dynamic wines. And you have to highlight the fact that there's also the right balance, the right maturity, which wasn't the case previously. So now we have ripe and fresh wines. And that means a concentration of pleasure, which also goes to explain why it's so popular with the public at large. It's this type of freshness which Alsace brings to us. And for an amateur wine taster, and we have very precise data in France about drinkers, the more you drink, the more you want this type of wine, the more you're looking for something dynamic. It's just like in the sphere of cuisine, you're looking for simplicity and pleasure, because at one point in time, too much sophisticated food or drink is too much. It's what Jenny was saying. It's when something is fresh, digest, and pleasurable that you drink it. Yves, before we move on to the next one, what do you have to say? Well, freshness, that's what makes you want to drink the wine. It's the fact that it lessens your thirst. Let's not forget that it's a beverage. Wine is a beverage. It's a drink. It's also there to quench your thirst. It makes you freshen, and of course, we're hedonistic. It gives us pleasure. Sometimes we say, Prost, no, let's not talk, let's just drink. It's fresh, point, period. Well, I won't forget that sentence of yours. Let's not talk, let's drink. That was a good one. Let's move on. Thank you for your descriptions of this first trend. And the second trend is called Saut Terroir. Around the world, there are so many great wines, and all these great wines are linked to great terroirs. We have examples around the world, but in Alsace in particular, we find all types of soil. You can say that Alsace is a concentrate of all types of soils which exist around the world. It's a very small region, but with all possible soils. It's a window on the types of soils of the world. It's unique as such. When we look for authenticity, but at the same time origin, and dimension. You want to know where the product comes from, where it originates from, its birthplace. Basically, you want to know what its terroir is. As you know, domains are transmitted from one generation to the next. They remain in families. For some families, it's the 12th generation, 13th, even the 14th generation, and they are definitely attached to their terroir. And it's true that in Alsace, you have plots which have a very human dimension, with a family who is definitely related to their soil and their plot and their terroir. What is a terroir? A wine from a terroir has a story, has a family, has an author. I would say it's an author's wine. The author is the person who understands the environment, who understands the complexity of not only the plot, but of the soil, of the roots, and which will give its final taste to the wine. Let's illustrate this with a Grand Cru Quitterlet, 2017. Quitterlet is a lieu-dit. It's not very far from here, right behind you, actually. Right behind this domain. Schlumberger in Guebwiller is the one which exploits it. It is volcanic rock and sandstone. It's well exposed to the sun. Actually, there are different sides to it, and it looks out on the valley. And depending on what side you're on, the exposition to the sun is different. And it's a very strong slope with sandstone walls. Very impressive. It's not much in quantity that's produced. This is an excellent wine year, 2017. We have a great vintage here. We'll be talking about that a bit more, but what we feel here are the notes of naphtha, smoked smell, which is linked to the volcanic sandstone. Also the citrus fruits smell, but especially the naphtha, I would say. That's concerning the nose. Then, the mouth. It's tighter than the previous wine. It's a bit more austere, perhaps more concentrated, and it really makes you feel the taste. It's really a grand vin de terroir, a great wine, typically French. It's just not translatable. Yes, so French, that's the right word. When we discussed the theme at the outset together, you said, we have to explain what that means. What does the term terroir mean? So now tell me, how would you define it? What is the concept of terroir and Alsace? I think there's something really fantastic. There's just no translation for terroir. Or perhaps there is one somewhere out there, but I don't know any translation. Systematically, you use the word terroir. Terroir is a whole sum of different ideas. It's an equation in which you find so many ingredients. And sometimes you just use the word terroir when you find no other words. You say, well, it's thanks to its terroir. But it's true, it would be useful to define the terroir more closely. Obviously, it's the terrain, it's the ground, it's the soil, it's the microclimate, it's the place of birth, it's also the slope, the degree of the slope, it's the way men and women are working on that soil with the grape. So it's the impact of the human hand, be it a woman or a man. The person, human person, plays a major role on the terroir, because take two different wine growers on the same plot, on the same terroir, nevertheless, the wines will be different. You'll have two wines. So obviously there's also the individual touch, which has its impact on the final taste. So terroir is a whole list of factors. All right, and when you taste a Grand Cru, such as this one, or perhaps another one, another terroir, knowing that in Alsace, each of the grape varieties is born on a different type of soil. When you taste a terroir wine, whatever it might be, what is it that you're looking for? What is it you're expecting, or what is it you're seeking? I'm sorry, it's a very difficult question. Well, I expect it to be tasty, first of all. Yes, but compared to the first one, for instance. Okay, if you compare it to the first wine, you're immediately in the notion of precision. It's straight. I think it's looking for a destination, it goes further. You also feel the tension and perhaps the salt. There's a very clear break and background to this wine. So you're immediately on another type of construction. It's something which is much more complex in terms of structure. The notion of terroir is also something that you notice with time, because a younger wine, okay, there are exceptions, of course. When there's a rule, there's an exception. But if you take a younger wine, it won't reveal the whole spectrum of its terroir as compared to a wine such as this one, which has at least 5 or 6 years, and come the years, come the terroir, you feel it more and more. It expresses itself more with the years. The notion of a grand terroir, by definition, is also linked to the potential it can have. It's a long-lasting wine. The grand terroir wines obviously are something which tastes better year after year. Yes, that's actually the possibility of having long-lasting wine, because usually what we had in the older habits, previous habits, was people who drank the wine immediately. But now we've noticed that it's phenomenal how many years you can keep this good quality wine. That's something new, and it's also something very personal, which you've just described. Yes, you see in one wine an acid structure, and a very well-integrated acid structure, which makes it possible to keep it for longer. It's the skeleton of the wine. It's one of the elements, one of the backbone elements of this wine. The acidity pulls to it all the other elements, integrates them, and thanks to that, it can just travel through time. I have questions now for our two sommeliers at my side. Sorry, Jenny, this time I'll start with Manuel. How can you give that emotion to your guests? How can you pass on the meaning of the word terroir? How do you do it? Well, what's interesting usually is to highlight the complexity which is added to the first wine, because the first taste was something fresh and dynamic. But now it's like a millefeuille. There are 1,000 different shadows and tastes. So what we want to tell the guest is it's complex, so you have to concentrate to feel the structure, the complexity, the structures, the salt as it operates on the taste buds of your tongue. And Riesling is actually a magnifying glass. You have a crude, a concentrated taste. It's not only in the mouth, it's also at the back of the palate. In order to feel that, I think you shouldn't just taste, you should also compare. The richness of Alsace is this unique mosaic of soils and of varieties, also altitudes and degrees of slopes. And obviously, yes, the hand of the man or the woman, and the warmth of the year or the coolness of the vintage. And I believe that the reason for which there's this new trend, this so terroir trend in the heads and mouths of consumers, it's because it's complex and you want to understand, you want to feel and get the feeling and the touch of this richness of the different terroirs of Alsace. It's very well expressed. I would say it's an open door on something which makes wine more complete yet, because of course we like to taste it, but we also like to talk about it, to understand it. And once you've understood it, you can talk much more about it. Jenny, you have experience in this field. You have experience on a thematic, which I must say the word is French, terroir, but it does hide a reality. How do you transmit this feeling to friends or guests? How do you pass on the message? How do you transfer, translate the notion of terroir? How do people react?
So it's so French, which we love. But I think in a simple way, and I think it's also important that usually in the situation where guests are asking about a particular place, I have a very short period of time in which to explain it at a table, right, in a practical way. And so I kind of relate it to a sense of place and maybe a short quip about where the wine is from, which I probably already explained prior to the wine going to the table, and having them understand that there's so many components to what terroir means, sense of place, to all of everything that you were explaining. You know, it's the people, it's the soil, it's everything together which combines into this thing. But you also have to think about it in the context of food, right? So if you're in a restaurant and your guest is enjoying this wine, how is this wine elevating the cuisine? And to what you were saying, it's a magnifying glass, right? And so these wines are powerful, they're precise, they're long-lasting. And when you take a sip before the food, amazing, but when you take a sip with the food, it elevates those flavors, it elevates the texture, it elevates the experience. Then the guest thinks, I want to try a little bit more from, you know, different parts of this region. And I think, as you were saying, it opens a door, you know? It opens a door to, wow, what can this wine provide for my experience, for my meal? And there's so much opportunity in this region for that. So that's kind of what I think about that.
It's very interesting to see all the different points of view depending on each of your origins and experiences, and that's a diversity and a richness, and I would really like to thank you for that. Third trend. Well, I don't want to say that we were serious until now, but we were focused. And now we're going to continue on the so sweet trend. What do we want with the so sweet trend? Pleasure, fun, shake up the codes. We want to let ourselves be seduced by something which is more extravagant, which gets off the beaten track. And that's true for our consumers. They're looking for something which is accessible without too much expertise, just having fun, getting pleasure easily. And one element which is interesting to know, we're talking about pleasure in wine, and since 2021, except for Crémant, which has its own classification, and the Vendange Tardive sweet wine, for the other wines, we have a scale of sweetness. Dry, medium dry, medium sweet, sweet, etc. And this clarifies the range, but it also clarifies the balance, because that's very important too. We'll come back to that. So sweet, how can we define it? In one word, pleasure. It's gourmet pleasure. It's flamboyance, not having to take risks, no hassle, the idea being simply enjoy. It's also an invitation in parallel to have some culinary audacity, and Manuel no doubt will be telling us about that. The first wine, well, you've already, I think you've emptied your bottle and your glass. Would you like a bit more of that one? Well, perhaps later. It's a Gewürztraminer 2020 Vieille Vigne, so it's the same vintage as the first wine. I recall it was warm. The Gewürztraminer might be the hardest word to spell and to pronounce. Even when you're French, a bit hard with the Z and T. Well, it's a Gewürztraminer from the domain Hurst, which is around Turkheim. The stock is 50 years old, and it's a granite rock. Perhaps that's not the type of terroir which you might think is the most adapted for Gewürztraminer. Nevertheless, you'll see, proof is in the tasting, that it is definitely right. The nose. The nose is very spicy, very typical for granite soil. And actually, Gewürz means spice. You feel the peach. You have the hint of the raisins. And in the mouth, you have just a very slight note of acidity, which is not necessarily something typical for Gewürztraminer. You don't have a typical acidity. You feel the stone fruits, Mirabelle plum in particular, I think, quite extraordinary. Balanced, just at the end of the mouth, you feel slight bitterness. So it's exactly what we're looking for. Manuel, when we were preparing the masterclass and I presented all the themes, you said, "Oh, great, so sweet. I love that. That's my playing field. I want to be the first." Well, go ahead. Why is this type of wine for you as a sommelier interesting? Well, on a very personal note, the reason for which I became a sommelier is sweet wine, such as the wine we're tasting now. So for me, it's a flashback. It's back to my first love, so to say, my first love of wine. Today, when we talk about sweet wines and wines where there's residual sugar, you can't say, "I don't like sweet wines." You can't say blackout on sweet wines. It's just like in the high-end pâtisserie. You need to be balanced. We said freshness, acidity, maturity, terroir, and intensification of messages. Let's recall that for this type of wine, you need more mature grape. So it's a choice. It's taking risks for the growers who give birth to this type of wine. These versions are so much better than what we had previously because we know that in the past it wasn't as tasty, and I think I'm the best ambassador for sweet wines. We need this type of wine in our cellar. Why? Because at the table, they accompany, they pair with specific types of foods. Some cuisine which is the richest in terms of emotions, rich emotions, and also taking risks. You can associate and pair this wine with great surprises. I'm the first person who's ready to open a bottle of Gewürztraminer to my friends. So there's not just sweet, there's also wisdom in it when you have a lamb curry and a Gewürz. Just try it. You can also have mango salad with shrimp, a Sichuan sauce, and spicy tastes. You can play with saffron and citrus. It's the greatest playing field for this type of wine. And sometimes you need it and you don't have it in your cellar. Let me interrupt you. From the practical point of view, when you tell me about how you match, how you pair Gewürztraminer with foods, I understand you enjoy it, but how do you do it? Well, it's aromatic esters that fit with others in chemical terms. And to have the right marriage, you need to have a fusion of the aroma. 1 + 1 is more than 2. It's also an issue of textures, what kind of texture your cuisine has. And when you pair food and wine with something which is soft as this, it just melts into the matter. As Jennifer previously said, it's the way you can stretch the message. And this Gewürztraminer is a carrier of bergamot, of spice, of pear, various notes and aromas, and I think each one will have tasted the best of what he could expect. And you have to marry it with something else. That's where you can be creative with Asian food, Oriental food. Red wines will definitely not be there to help you out with that type of cuisine. It won't work. And I come from Bourguignon, so it makes me cry when I say that, no, you shouldn't be drinking red wine with exotic foods. So for those who are listening to us, the So Sweet trend, and especially the Gewürz we have in front of us, is just a must-have. You must have it. I have it in my cellar, and every time I have a soirée for a nice evening, I can just illustrate what I've just said. Taste it, you'll believe it. Yves. Well, I'm so thankful to Manuel for this very convincing speech. I hope you will have convinced others than myself, because I can only repeat that sugar is the friend of Alsace. It's definitely not its enemy, it's its ally. You can do so much with sugar. The right thing is, of course, balance. It's also a question of how you balance it. But let's stop saying sweet wines are only for the dessert. No, you can't start excluding things from the outset. And it's fantastic to have heard you. You just explained it wonderfully, well. You can play with sweet wines. There are so many ways of pairing it, of marrying it, and sugar is just one element amongst other elements. Striking the right balance is the key. And that's true for all wines in general. But here, all the more on this type of wine. You taste many wines. How would you describe the evolution of the degree of sugar in wines presently? Because at the basis, a wine is perhaps balanced, and there's a dissociation later on in time. At the beginning, it wasn't too sweet. Do you notice that sometimes a wine gets sweet? What balance do you appreciate? Concerning the substance and the value, sometimes it's not so much the wine itself that changes, it's our perception over time of how it tastes. Sugar doesn't move that much. The acidity doesn't move that much. What changes is how we perceive it, our reaction to what we're tasting. A sommelier chooses a given wine for us. That's where the sommelier plays a key role by making the right choice. In some white wines, I said red, no, I meant white wines. The sugar in some white wines has the same evolution as tannins in red wines with time. Yes, a nice metaphor. But what you're saying is the quantity might not change. It's us who change. I'd like to add that you have an aromatic variation which is higher than its age. We talked about the saut terroir previously, and we realize now that with sugar, sometimes you have a combination of a new complex layer, an add-on layer, which brings it a richer bouquet. And we see it with this type of vintage. We have fragrances we don't have with others. I'd like to answer a question which I see posted up there. This Gewürztraminer says vieille vigne. There's no regulation as to whether or not you can use vieille vigne. We consider that you can say that the stock is vieille vigne when it's older than a fourth of a century. So if it's over 25 years old, 26 years old. Before we move on to the next topic, I do want to put the question to Jenny. You told me about cheeses. You had a very extraordinary experience. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Tell us the story.
No, so I was explaining before, yes, first of all, cheese and these sorts of wines from Alsace on the sweeter side. I had a moment, I was in Alsace in 2018. I never had an experience with sweet wine and cheese like this one. It was a magical experience, and I try to carry that with me in the restaurants. But I feel like the savory and sweet component to me really, it does something that is really elevating for both the wine and, again, for the cheeses. Like very stinky, delicious, aged cheeses as well. I think it's really fantastic. I always try to sneak in. It's like a little trick of mine. People are, if they say, oh, I don't like sweet wine, I don't drink sweet wine, I'll give a little taste with something just as this is on me. I would love you just to taste it and give me your opinion, walk away, come back. Oh my gosh, this was amazing. And then moving forward, they'll be the first to order a glass, and they'll tell their friends to order a glass. And that's kind of the way that I've always been able to get people on board with it, because sometimes the guests are a little bit afraid, but then once they understand and they experience it, it's a whole different world for them. So I think that's a fun experience to create.
Tu as abordé un sujet qui est intéressant. Je fais juste une
It's
parenthèse
a
avant de
really
passer
interesting
au
subject.
dernier sujet.
And before
Le
we
vin et
move on to our
fromage.
last theme, wine and cheese. In 90% of cases, people will say they want red wine with their cheese. And it's true that in Alsace, there's an extraordinary place for wine with cheese, because we also have so many cheeses, and it's true that wine and cheese do go well together. And you can't be afraid of experimenting and trying with sweet wines. Yes, you must absolutely have white wines with cheese, because what everybody has is a whole plateau of cheeses, because we are so French and gourmet. And sometimes you also have dry fruit in the cheese plate, so we do know, or marmalade, so we do know that sweets go well with cheese. And I would say that there's a real fusion of aromas. Actually, sweets and cheese go so well. You can't have one wine for every cheese. That would be very precise, but not drinkable. So, yes, it's intelligent to also have sweet wines with cheese, and you can have something innovative and fun. Cheese is what brings more dynamism to your meal, to your dinner, and with a bit of terroir, and then after a bit of so sweet, it's just like the final bouquet when you have firecrackers. Yes, well, that's a nice finale. Now, last thing that we're looking into, so red, that's the fourth trend. So I said we do have 90% of white wines in Alsace, but we do also have the reds. We have a tradition of white wines linked to our gastronomy. Salty, smoky, sauerkraut, etc. 200 years of tradition, but we also have red wines. It's true that previously gastronomy was different. These last 30 years, 20 years, we see that there's a renewal, in fact, a renaissance of red wines, in particular the Pinot Noir. Popular in Alsace, we have here a grape variety which grows on limestone. It can also grow on other stones. Here we have something which used to be a curiosity, pioneering, but now it's more and more popular. And we now have quite extraordinary red wines. I like to say silky to describe this type of Pinot Noir. It's Pinot Noir, Rodern from the Cave de Ribeauvillé, the cellar of Ribeauvillé, vintage 2019. It's an AOC wine, a protected designation of origin of the commune of Rodern, which is known not only since decades, but since centuries for its red wine. This one is Glockenberg Grand Cru. It's at the same time granite and clay. The clay brings the tannins. Oh, it's not exactly Grand Cru, but as you know, there are two lieux-dits which are entitled to have Grand Cru, the Hengst and the Kirchberg. But actually, we should have another masterclass in the future to describe those. These are also wines which need time, which need to age. The color, it's ruby red, very deep red. I'm not going to describe it at length, but very classical type of vinification, 9 months in oak barrels, in ancient oak barrels, in order to have some more supple tannins and to have a micro-oxidation which develops the aroma, and in particular, the black cherry, black currant, and blackberry aroma. Beautiful notes. And it's nevertheless still silky in the mouth. It's harmonious. The acidity is very straight, very pure. Now I'm going to put the question to everybody. That will make it easier. We used to have a trend some time ago. People wanted something powerful. with many tannins. I'm not saying people were looking for the degree of alcohol, but practically, people wanted strong red wines. What's your impression? What do the consumers want? What do the guests want? Are they looking for something elegant again? Are they in search for more purity, for more drinkability, for red wine too? Well, I would say that these last 20 years we've seen new development, in particular for Pinot Noir from Alsace, all wines, but this one in particular, because at one point, people were looking for everything. Grapes weren't yet mature, but people wanted to drink. I don't even know if it was healthy to drink it at the time. Then more efforts were made, but you couldn't send the message out that you wanted. There was impatience. But then there was the Parker area and the search for concentration, more muscle, more strength. And it's a fashion more than a trend. Everybody was drinking it that way and commenting it that way. But no, now we've dropped the muscle for the brain, for the spirit. And I think the spirit is exactly what describes wine today. Something seducing, real perfume, expansive tastes, something which is more tasty in the mouth, which is something more in-depth, longer. Red wine, as Yves said previously, is a drink, a beverage. And the red wine and the Pinot Noir, because there are also other varieties, is exactly what you need to seduce. So with perfume, with tannins, which makes it possible to pair with foods, but also, as Jenny said, open the next bottle. That's what wine's there for, to talk and drink. It's exactly what we need. And we really enjoy this variety in Alsace because it matures well, it ripens well, and it's a great ambassador for what we have in this region. It's true that there was at one point less productivity and also the will to have more terroir. It's true that we also need limestone for this type of grape. I consider that it's not evolution these last 30 years, it's revolution. Is that what you've noticed? When, as a wine taster, how would you describe the change? Yes, I do indeed taste a lot of red wine and a lot of Pinot. I believe that the excellent work that was put into it by our wine growers, women and men alike, can be tasted in the glass. You feel how well Pinot Noir has found its place. And actually, it's nothing new. From the historical point of view, it was always there. You mentioned it. Obviously, the soil is right for the Pinot Noir, and it's a very fine wine. It's a very complex wine. Even when you only have one grape variety, you have a great taste. It really replies to the request for something which is fresh, which is sapide, which is drinkable. And with different types of structures or degrees of complexity. In some, there are more tannins. You would say they're tighter. Some are more soft, perhaps. There is a variety between the various Pinots, but basically they're all fresh, very fine. They have the right degree of acidity. That's what's necessary for a great Pinot. It's just there. It's in the glass. It's pleasure. I like the word spheric, to say it's precise, it's round. It's not necessarily powerful. It's something you want to caress, you want to touch. It's agreeable to touch. And you, Jenny, you also have an experience of Pinot Noir. Generally speaking, how would you describe it? You tasted it yesterday, last evening. What do you think of it? You had it today, too.
Well, I think, for me, this is a wine that's very exciting to introduce to people who have never had red wine from Alsace. There are people who really enjoy something on the elegant side. They're used to particular regions, and they haven't explored the beauty of Pinot Noir from this region. So it's always another one that's very exciting. Taste this. What do you think? Precise, textured. You know, it does have that beautiful mouthfeel, but it's also bright and lifting. shifted, it's ripe. So you have something with freshness that can carry you through a meal as well. So this is one of those, when you were asking, do guests or do consumers, are they still drinking these big, like very big wines? Yes, they are. As often? Probably not, in at least my experience. They're looking for something a little bit more elegant and a little bit more, I keep going back to drinking more wine. I guess that's just what I do, but so they can have more of those wines. So you don't want to have a 15% bottle of red, two bottles. I mean, you could, but you want to have something that's a little bit more moderate, that's a little bit more fresh, that's more gastronomic. And I think these wines are really beautiful in a gastronomic sense as well.
On me pose juste la question de la température de service du Pinot Noir. C'est vrai que
So
dans une
the
cave,
temperature. Somebody asked the question of the temperature. Temperature down here. Well, we're surviving.
It's perfect temperature for the wine.
C'est la température, je crois que
Concerning the temperature,
à la saisonnalité.
I think it's linked to seasonality. I'd like to say that. For me, take the Pinot Noir. In June, when it's 25 degrees Celsius outside and you have a 13, 14 degrees Celsius wine, okay, depends on the vintage, of course. It has to be young and the tannins have to be kind of discreet, but I put that between parentheses. You have a promise. You will never complain at that temperature. Take a colder temperature, closer to winter down the year. Maybe you'll have another experience. Perhaps it's around 16 degrees, where the Pinot will be in the right comfort zone. You have to appreciate the temperature. It can't be too warm, otherwise it will lose its floral note, its aroma, and I think it has to be precise. So yes, it does depend on the temperature at which you serve it. Okay, you're from Bourgogne. I'm going to call upon your experience. If you take the very same grape variety, is there a difference? If you're from Oregon, or if you're from Bourgogne, or if you're from Switzerland, is there a difference between the three Pinot Noirs? Or do you find the same aromas? Would you recognize this round structure? Well, I would say that there's a code, DNA, which you recognize when you're a genuine Pinot lover, Pinot enthusiast. There's this telluric feeling to it. If it's grown in Switzerland, for instance, on sand, it will be very floral with very little tannin, whereas if it's clay, perhaps deep red clay, as you might have here, it changes the structure of tannins. From the aromatic point of view, you'll have the very same promise for all of them, but it's at the end of the mouth, the architecture of the tannins, that you'll find the difference. And that's definitely linked to the terroirs, which we were describing previously. I find it really interesting. It's not just in Bourgogne or in Alsace, it's all around the world. People are looking for the signature of the birthplace, but for the rest, there is the promise of a given aroma. But those who are passionate about it are going to look for the feeling right there in the mouth, the signature of the birthplace. Well, in Alsace, we have all soils of the whole world. And actually, we can also have all the types of Pinot Noir of the whole world concentrated. Yes, you've got them. You've got them. So we have them here in Alsace. So we have questions where we're reaching the end of our masterclass, but we're not late. We're doing just fine, I would say. I would like to thank you for this time spent together, but the question is put to what is it that influences the taste? I think we need a whole masterclass. Is it the hand of the winemakers? Is it the machinery? What is it? It's not either or, it's both. I would say that actually the wine growers are quite discreet. They don't put themselves forward. It's not so much his or her name that he wants to be well known. Well, it's the terroir which really puts its footprint on the wine. Sometimes there's this immediate sense of where it comes from rather than who is the author of it, concerning the vinification process. But I think in the long term, I do believe the terroir comes before the author. We have other questions concerning the Riesling and Gewürztraminer. The first one, Chauffit, 3.5 grams of residual sugar. It's a dry wine. The Kitterle, 0.48 grams of sugar per liter. It's a notion of balance, Alcohol does play a role. And for the Gewürztraminer, 10 grams of residual sugar. But you do have the slightly bitter taste, end of mouth. How about the word vieille vigne, I'm asked? But I think we answered that. It's a concentrate. We said for Chauffit 80 years, that's what brings its regular taste. But it's true, sometimes you produce a better wine and in lesser quantities and perhaps lesser concentration. Well, unfortunately, this is the end of our masterclass. There's just one thing I want to ask you, very last thing, what message is it that you want to transmit? Because the idea of the masterclass is for our online public to be guided by your messages. So what's your messages? What's the end clap, so to say? What do you want to say about Alsace wines? Ladies first. We'll start with you, Jenny.
Well, I think I try to keep it very basic in this way because these wines speak for themselves, but because of the authenticity, because of the pleasure derived from these wines and the way that they can reach so many different people, I say that I'm in the pleasure or in the business of making people happy, and these wines make people happy. So for me, it's very, very easy to stand behind the region and the wines.
Great definition. Thank you. Yves, I'm so happy to see the headway made by Alsace today. When I decided to embark upon Alsatian wines, it was over 10 years ago, and at the time, the atmosphere wasn't that good. The morale was sort of low, and I'd like to quote the names of two friends who motivated me and kept me on the Alsatian track. Jean-Michel Dice. Thanks to him, I discovered his whole range of wines during a wine tasting session, where I told him, sorry, I'm not sure I understood much. It was a great lesson for me, because that's where I understood that there was so much I could learn and I wanted to learn. And then the other person who really marked my life, a great wine grower, Jean-Paul Schmidt, who, thanks to his Pinot Noir, showed me at the time already that there really was a topic I should be interested in, Pinot Noir, and in particular, the Alsatian Pinot Noir and Alsatian wines in general. I'm so glad I made that choice back then. Yes, and you've actually developed it. Yes, well, in Alsace, obviously. No, but it's a great evolution. But it's thanks to them that I opened my eyes. Manuel, oh, wait. First, I'd like to say that Manuel and I met, 23 years ago. I was giving a class in his sommelier school. I had him for half a day as a student, and I'm so glad to see you quarter of a century later. Well, yes, incredible experience since then. What I would like to say as way of conclusion that what feeds not only the mouth but also the spirit of a real wine lover is the diversity. And with these themes, so fresh, so sweet, so red, I think one word is missing. It's so necessary, because it is so necessary to have a diversity of wines in your wine cellar, because we have this very wide playing field in this region. and it has much to offer. And of course, I'd like to add that the sample is just one photography at a moment T, but there is such an exceptional range of wines. If what you remember of Alsace is something from the past, update yourself, because we have Jenny here, or we have you here, Yves. You are really precursors. You're pioneers. You are the ones who announce the new trends. And I think we've just had the proof by tasting how dynamic this region is. So I'm telling those who used to know wine, come back here and taste it as it is today. You'll enjoy it. Yes, enjoy, pleasure. Come back to Alsace. I think that's the right word. I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart, very sincerely. Thank you for your experience. Thank you for this discussion. Yes, wine is sharing. Wine is communicating. That's what we did today, and we see all these thanks coming. Merci, thank you, danke schön, great work, great setup. So all my heartfelt thanks to you. Thank you for your comments. Have a great evening. Enjoy.
Voilà. Alors, le temps de-